I discovered my propane tank was empty on the coldest morning of January, standing in my kitchen in Boise, Idaho, watching my breath form clouds in the air while my coffee maker sat useless on the counter. My name is Ryan Norwood, and I had moved into this planned community called Riverside Gardens exactly 8 months ago, thinking I had found the perfect place to settle down after my divorce. The house was beautiful, a 3-bedroom ranch with a nice backyard, and the HOA fees seemed reasonable at $300 a month. What I did not know was that I was about to enter a living nightmare orchestrated by the most vindictive, power-hungry woman I would ever meet. I went outside to check the propane tank, which sat on a concrete pad behind my house. The gauge read completely empty, which made no sense. I had just filled it 3 weeks ago, right after Christmas, and I had been careful with my usage. I heated my home primarily with electricity, using propane only for my gas stove, the hot water heater, and as a backup heat source. There was no logical explanation for why 500 gallons of propane would vanish in less than a month. I stood there in my pajamas and winter coat, staring at the tank, when I noticed something odd. There was a secondary line running from my tank, one that I had not installed. It disappeared into the ground, heading in the direction of the community pool house about 200 feet away. My blood started to boil as I traced the line with my eyes. I threw on proper clothes and marched over to the pool house, which was supposed to be closed for the winter. But as I approached, I could see steam rising from the outdoor heated pool. The HOA had installed a new heating system last fall, and apparently they had decided that my propane tank would be the perfect fuel source without bothering to ask or inform me. I tried the pool house door and found it unlocked. Inside, I followed the piping and confirmed my suspicion. Someone had professionally installed a connection from my personal propane tank to the pool heating system. This was not some amateur job. This had been planned and executed by people who knew exactly what they were doing. My phone was already in my hand when I heard a voice behind me. "Excuse me, what do you think you are doing in here?" I turned to see a woman in her mid-40s with blonde hair pulled back so tightly it looked painful, wearing designer workout clothes and an expression of absolute disdain. Her name tag read Brenda Patterson, HOA president. "I am looking at the illegal connection from my propane tank to this pool heater," I said, keeping my voice level despite my rage. "Would you know anything about that?" Brenda's face did not show even a flicker of shame or surprise. Instead, she crossed her arms and tilted her head. "Your propane tank is located on HOA property, which means it is available for community use. If you read your HOA bylaws, Section 12, Paragraph 4, you would understand that." I pulled out my phone and opened the PDF of the HOA bylaws I had saved when I bought the house. Section 12, Paragraph 4 states that the HOA maintains the common areas and that homeowners must maintain their individual lots. It says nothing about my personal property being available for community use. "Well, that is your interpretation," Brenda said with a dismissive wave. "The HOA board voted on this, and we determined that since your tank sits near the property line, it falls under shared resources. You should be happy to contribute to the community." "Are you insane?" The words came out before I could stop them. "You stole $500 worth of propane from me without permission. That is theft. I am calling the police." Brenda stepped closer, her eyes narrowing. "If you call the police, I will make your life a living hell in this community. I will fine you for every single violation I can find. Your grass is currently 1/4 of an inch too long in the back corner of your yard. That is a $200 fine. You have a garden hose visible from the street. That is another $100. Your mailbox has a small rust spot. Another 100. Should I continue? I stared at her in disbelief. You cannot be serious. Try me, she said coldly. Or you can be a good neighbor and accept that we all make sacrifices for the community. The pool heater will only run through March. After that, we will disconnect it for the summer. I wanted to explode. I wanted to call her every name in the book. But I also knew that HOA boards in Idaho had a disturbing amount of power, and getting into a war with them could result in liens on my property, endless fines, and legal fees that would drain my savings. So I did what any reasonable person would do in that moment. I lied. Fine, I said through gritted teeth. But the HOA is reimbursing me for the propane you have already used, and you are paying for all future propane while the heater is connected. Brenda smiled, a thin, cruel expression. We will discuss reimbursement at the next board meeting in February. Until then, consider it your contribution to community wellness. She walked past me and out of the pool house, leaving me standing there shaking with anger. I went home and immediately called my lawyer, Tom Richardson, who had handled my divorce. He listened to my story and sighed heavily. Ryan, I hate to say this, but fighting an HOA is expensive and time-consuming. They have deep pockets from everyone's dues, and they can drag this out for years. Even if you win, you will spend more in legal fees than the propane is worth. So they just get away with stealing from me. I am not saying that. I am saying you need to be strategic. Document everything. Take photos and videos of the connection. Get statements from the propane company about when you filled your tank and how much you have used. Build a case. And in the meantime, see if you can resolve this through the board. I knew he was right, but it did not make me feel any better. I spent the rest of that day documenting everything. I took dozens of photos of the illegal connection, the piping, the empty tank, and the pool heater controls. I called my propane supplier and got written statements about my usage history. I even hired a plumber to come out and verify that the connection had been installed without proper permits. The plumber, an older guy named Jack, whistled when he saw the setup. Whoever did this knew what they were doing, but it is completely illegal. You need permits to run gas lines, especially across property boundaries. This could result in serious fines for whoever authorized it. Can you write that in a report? I asked. Absolutely. This is a lawsuit waiting to happen. That evening, I sat at my kitchen table with all my documentation and drafted a formal letter to the HOA board. I detailed the theft, the illegal installation, the lack of permits, and the potential safety hazards. I demanded immediate disconnection of the line, reimbursement for all propane used, and a formal apology. I sent it certified mail to ensure they could not claim they never received it. 3 days later, I got a response. It was not what I expected. The letter, signed by Brenda and 2 other board members, stated that upon review of my complaint, they had determined that I was in violation of multiple HOA covenants. Attached was a list of 17 violations and corresponding fines totaling $3,400, due within 30 days. I read through the list in disbelief. They claimed my house numbers were not the approved font. My front door wreath was not removed within 7 days of Christmas ending. My garbage cans were visible from certain angles. My lawn had dandelions. The list went on, each violation more petty and ridiculous than the last. This was war. I immediately called Tom again. They are retaliating. This is clearly retaliation for my complaint. It absolutely is, Tom agreed. And that is something we can use. Start documenting every interaction with the HOA. Save every email, every letter, every fine notice. And Ryan, do not pay those fines. If you pay them, It is an admission that the violations are legitimate. What about the propane situation? Keep documenting. How much propane have they used so far? I checked my receipts and did the math. About $800 worth, and the tank needs to be refilled again. That is another $500 that I do not want to pay for them to steal. Tom was quiet for a moment. Here is what I suggest. If they will not disconnect the line voluntarily, you have the right to secure your own property. You can legally disconnect the line yourself, but make sure you document everything and do it safely. An idea was forming in my mind, one that probably was not entirely legal but felt justified given the circumstances. What if I just disconnect it without telling them? That is your property and your propane, Tom said carefully. You have every right to control access to it. Just be prepared for the fallout. We talked for a few more minutes about strategy and potential next steps. After I hung up, I sat there thinking about the situation. Brenda and her cronies thought they could bully me into submission. They thought they could steal from me and then bury me under ridiculous fines and regulations. They were about to learn a very hard lesson. I waited until the following Saturday evening. I knew the HOA board meeting was happening that night at Brenda's house, which meant the pool area would be deserted. I grabbed my tools, a flashlight, and my phone to document everything. The connection point was behind my propane tank, hidden from casual view but easy to access once you knew where to look. I took several videos showing the setup, explaining clearly that I was disconnecting an unauthorized and illegal connection to my personal property. Then I carefully shut off the valve and disconnected the line, capping both ends properly to prevent any gas leaks. The whole process took about 20 minutes. When I was done, I had successfully cut off the propane supply to the pool heater without damaging anything or creating any safety hazards. I put my tools away, went back inside, and waited. I did not have to wait long. Sunday morning at 7:30, my doorbell rang repeatedly, accompanied by aggressive pounding. I looked through the peephole and saw Brenda standing on my porch, her face red with fury. I opened the door and gave her my best confused expression. "Can I help you? You disconnected the pool heater," she shouted, loud enough that several neighbors came out to see what was happening. "That is destruction of HOA property." "I disconnected an illegal connection to my personal propane tank," I said calmly, making sure my voice carried to the growing audience. "The connection that you installed without my permission, without proper permits, and in violation of local building codes. The connection that you used to steal hundreds of dollars of propane from me. That was approved by the board. The board does not have the authority to help themselves to my personal property. If you want to run a heated pool, you need to pay for your own propane." Brenda's eyes were practically bulging. "You will regret this. I will fine you for every single thing I can find. I will put a lien on your house. I will make you wish you never moved here." "Are you threatening me?" I asked, still calm, "in front of all these witnesses?" Several neighbors were now openly watching and filming on their phones. Brenda seemed to realize her mistake. She took a step back, visibly trying to compose herself. "This is not over," she hissed, then stormed off to her car. I waved to the neighbors and went back inside, feeling a grim sense of satisfaction. But I knew this was only the beginning. Over the next week, things escalated quickly. I received a notice from the HOA demanding I reconnect the propane line immediately or face a $5,000 fine. I responded with a formal letter from Tom, explaining that the demand was illegal and that we were pursuing legal action for the theft and harassment. The HOA responded by placing a lien on my property for the previous fines they had assessed. Tom filed a motion to have the lien removed, arguing it was retaliatory and based on fabricated violations. The judge scheduled a hearing for mid-February. Meanwhile, I noticed that the pool was still running, which confused me. If I had disconnected their propane, how were they heating the water? I decided to investigate. One evening after dark, I walked over to the pool house and looked around. That was when I discovered they had brought in portable propane tanks, the large industrial kind that cost a fortune to rent and fill. They were spending absurd amounts of money to heat this pool out of pure spite, but I also noticed something else. The temperature in Boise had been dropping at night, getting down into the low teens. And while the pool itself was heated, the pipes running from the heater to the pool were not properly insulated. In fact, looking at the installation, it seemed like whoever had set up this system had done it quickly and cheaply, probably to save on costs. Those pipes were going to freeze. I thought about warning them. I really did. But then I remembered Brenda's threats, the illegal theft of my propane, the vindictive fines, and the lien on my property. Why should I warn them about a problem they had created for themselves through their own incompetence and greed? So I did nothing. 3 days later, on a Wednesday morning when the temperature had dropped to 9 degrees overnight, I woke to the sound of sirens. I looked out my window and saw fire trucks and emergency vehicles at the pool house. Water was everywhere, creating massive sheets of ice across the parking lot and surrounding areas. The pipes had burst, catastrophically. Without my propane providing steady heat, the portable tanks had run out during the night, and the system had frozen solid. When the ice expanded, it ruptured not just the pipes, but also the heater unit itself and damaged the pool filtration system. Water had poured out for hours before anyone noticed, flooding the pool house and causing significant damage to the building's foundation. I got dressed and walked over to see the chaos firsthand. Emergency crews were working to shut off the water and assess the damage. Brenda was there, wrapped in a fur coat, screaming at anyone who would listen. "This is sabotage," she shrieked. "Ryan Norwood did this intentionally. He disconnected our heating system knowing this would happen." A fire captain, a tall man with a patient but tired expression, was trying to calm her down. "Madam, from what I can see, this was caused by inadequate winterization of the pipes and system failure when your propane supply ran out." "Do you have permits for this heating installation?" Brenda's face went pale. "Permits?" "Yes, permits. Any gas line installation, any heating system installation requires proper permits and inspection. I am going to need to see documentation that this system was installed legally and up to code." "Well, the board approved it." "That is not the same as a building permit, madam. I am going to have to report this to the code enforcement office. In the meantime, this entire area is a safety hazard and will need to remain closed until the damage is assessed and repaired." I watched from a safe distance as Brenda's world started to crumble. Another board member arrived, a woman named Patricia Chen, and I could see them arguing in heated whispers. Patricia kept gesturing at the damage and shaking her head. Over the next few days, the full extent of the disaster became clear. The repairs were estimated at over $70,000. The insurance company was refusing to cover it because the installation had been done without permits and therefore violated the policy terms. The city building inspector came out and slapped the HOA with multiple violations and fines totaling $15,000 for unpermitted work. But it got worse for Brenda. One of the neighbors, a man named George who lived across from me, approached me one evening as I was getting my mail. "Ryan, I thought you should know. Patricia resigned from the HOA board yesterday, and she sent an email to all the homeowners explaining what Brenda did." "What do you mean?" Apparently, Brenda authorized that connection to your propane tank without full board approval. She told the contractor to do it and used HOA funds to pay for it, but she never actually got a vote from the other board members. Patricia found the records and forwarded everything to all of us. People are furious. He showed me the email on his phone. Patricia had indeed laid everything out in meticulous detail. Brenda had acted unilaterally, spending HOA money without authorization, creating liability for the association, and then trying to cover it up by threatening and fining me when I complained. The email ended with a call for an emergency meeting to remove Brenda from the board and discuss legal action against her for mismanagement of HOA funds. The emergency meeting was scheduled for the following Tuesday evening at the community center. I debated whether to attend, but ultimately decided I needed to be there to tell my side of the story. The community center was packed. Apparently, every homeowner in Riverside Gardens wanted to see the drama unfold. I found a seat near the back and waited. Patricia, acting as interim board president, called the meeting to order. "Thank you all for coming on short notice. We are here to discuss serious allegations of mismanagement and abuse of authority by our former president, Brenda Patterson. Brenda was invited to attend but has declined." A murmur went through the crowd. Patricia continued, "I want to start by apologizing to Ryan Norwood. Ryan, are you here?" I raised my hand and everyone turned to look at me. "I want to publicly apologize for what was done to you. The unauthorized use of your propane, the retaliatory fines, and the harassment you endured were completely unacceptable and not representative of how this HOA should operate. The board is prepared to reimburse you for all propane stolen, remove all fines, and lift the lien on your property immediately." There was applause, which surprised me. Apparently, I was not the only person who had suffered under Brenda's reign. Patricia went on to detail all of Brenda's violations. Beyond my situation, she had been using HOA money for personal expenses, including charging lavish dinners to the association credit card and using HOA funds to landscape her own property. The total amount she had misappropriated was over $30,000. The board is voting to remove Brenda Patterson from her position effective immediately and to pursue legal action to recover the misappropriated funds. All in favor. The vote was unanimous among the remaining board members. Additionally, we will be filing a report with the police regarding the theft of HOA funds and the theft of Mr. Norwood's propane. That got my attention. I had not expected criminal charges. After the meeting, Patricia approached me. "Ryan, I know this has been a nightmare for you. The HOA will cover all your legal expenses related to this matter, and we are prepared to settle any civil claims you might have. We just ask that you give us a chance to make this right." I looked at this woman who seemed genuinely remorseful and tired. "I appreciate that, Patricia. I just want my propane reimbursed, the fines removed, and to be left alone to live in my house in peace. You have my word. And I am working with the board to implement new oversight measures so something like this can never happen again." We shook hands, and I went home feeling like maybe, just maybe, this nightmare was ending, but it was not quite over yet. 2 weeks later, on a cold February morning, I was drinking coffee in my kitchen when I saw a police car pull up to Brenda's house 3 doors down. 2 officers got out, walked to her door, and after a brief conversation, led Brenda out in handcuffs. I learned later from George that Brenda had been charged with theft, embezzlement, and criminal mischief. The prosecutor was taking the case seriously because the total amount of money involved exceeded $50,000 when you included my propane, the HOA funds she had stolen, and the damage to the pool house that resulted from her illegal installation. The HOA also hired a forensic accountant who discovered that Brenda had been systematically stealing from the association for over 2 years, long before the propane incident. She had created fake vendor invoices, paid herself for services never rendered, and even taken kickbacks from contractors who overcharged the HOA for work. Her husband filed for divorce within a month. The legal process dragged on through the spring. My lawsuit against the HOA was settled quickly and favorably. They reimbursed me $1,200 for propane, paid my legal fees of $4,000, and gave me an additional $5,000 as compensation for the harassment and stress. All fines were removed, and the lien was formally released. The criminal case against Brenda took longer. Her lawyer tried to negotiate a plea deal, but the prosecutor was not interested in going easy. The case went to trial in late April. I was called as a witness. Sitting in that courtroom, I told the jury exactly what had happened. How I discovered my propane was being stolen. How Brenda threatened me when I complained. How she retaliated with bogus fines and a property lien. The prosecutor used my testimony to establish a pattern of abuse of power and willingness to break the law to maintain control. The trial lasted 3 weeks. In the end, the jury found Brenda guilty on multiple counts of theft, embezzlement, and fraud. The judge sentenced her to 4 years in prison and ordered her to pay full restitution to both the HOA and me. As the bailiff led her away, Brenda looked at me with such hatred that I actually felt a chill. But I also felt vindicated. She had tried to bully me, to steal from me, to make my life miserable, and in the end, justice had prevailed. Life in Riverside Gardens slowly returned to normal. Patricia and the new board implemented strict oversight measures, required multiple signatures for any expenditures over $500, and hired a professional management company to handle day-to-day operations. The pool house was eventually repaired, though it took until June because of the extent of the damage and the need to do everything properly with permits and inspections this time. The HOA decided not to run a heated pool anymore, concluding it was too expensive and problematic. They converted it to a seasonal pool, open only from Memorial Day to Labor Day. I became friendly with several of my neighbors, particularly George, who turned out to be a retired engineer with a great sense of humor about the whole situation. We would sometimes sit on my back deck, looking at the propane tank that had started this whole mess, and laugh about how something so mundane had exposed such corruption. One evening in July, as the sun was setting and we were enjoying cold beers, George said, "You know, Ryan, a lot of people would have just paid the fines and let the HOA walk all over them. I am glad you fought back." I took a sip of my beer and thought about that. I almost did not. It would have been easier to just accept it and move on, but something about the injustice of it, the sheer arrogance of Brenda thinking she could just help herself to my property and then punish me for complaining. I could not let that stand. Well, you did everyone in this neighborhood a favor. Who knows how long Brenda would have kept stealing if you had not exposed her? That was probably true. The forensic accountant estimated that if her theft had continued unchecked, the HOA would have been bankrupt within another year, and all the homeowners would have been hit with massive special assessments to cover the shortfall. As the summer progressed, I finally started to feel at home in Riverside Gardens. The stress and anger that had dominated my life for months began to fade. I focused on fixing up my house, planting a garden, and just enjoying the peaceful life I had moved here to find. In August, I got a letter from the Department of Corrections. Brenda wanted to meet with me as part of a restorative justice program. I was not obligated to agree, but the letter said she wanted to apologize and take responsibility for her actions. I thought about it for a long time. Part of me wanted nothing to do with her ever again, but another part of me was curious. I talked to Tom, who advised me that I should only go if I felt emotionally ready and if I thought it would give me closure. I decided to go. The meeting was held at a mediation center, not the prison. Brenda was there with her therapist and a mediator. She looked different from the last time I had seen her. Thinner, older, with gray roots showing in her blonde hair and no makeup. She looked like someone who had been broken down and was trying to rebuild. The mediator explained the process and asked if I was comfortable proceeding. I said yes. Brenda took a deep breath. "Ryan, I want to apologize for everything I did to you. The propane theft, the harassment, the fines, all of it. There is no excuse for my behavior. I was on a power trip, and I thought that being HOA president meant I could do whatever I wanted. I was wrong, and I hurt you and a lot of other people." I listened without interrupting. I have been in therapy since my arrest, and I have learned that I was using the HOA as a way to control my life when everything else felt out of control. My marriage was falling apart. My kids barely talked to me. I felt invisible and unimportant, and the HOA gave me power and significance. But I abused that power terribly. She paused, her eyes filling with tears. "I know I destroyed my own life with my choices. I lost everything. My family, my home, my freedom, and I deserve all of it, but I am truly sorry for what I did to you. You were just trying to live your life, and I made it hell because my ego could not handle being challenged." I sat there for a moment, processing. This was not the vindictive, arrogant woman who had stood on my porch screaming threats. This was someone who had hit rock bottom and was trying to claw her way back to being human. "I appreciate the apology," I said finally. "I do not forgive you yet, because what you did caused me a lot of pain and stress, but I appreciate that you are taking responsibility." Brenda nodded, tears now flowing freely. "I understand. I just wanted you to know that I am sorry and that if I could undo everything, I would." The meeting lasted about an hour. We talked through some of the specific incidents, with Brenda acknowledging each one and explaining her mindset at the time. It was not easy, but by the end, I felt like I had some closure. As I was leaving, Brenda said one more thing. "Ryan, you did the right thing by standing up to me. If you had not, I would have kept going until I destroyed everything. In a weird way, you saved me by forcing me to face consequences." I did not know what to say to that, so I just nodded and left. Driving home, I thought about the whole saga. It had started with a simple observation that my propane tank was empty and had ended with criminal convictions, massive financial penalties, and lives changed forever. All because one person thought they had the right to take what was not theirs. When I got home, I sat on my back deck and looked at the propane tank. It was just a tank, a mundane piece of equipment that most people would never think twice about. But it had been the catalyst for exposing corruption and bringing justice. I called Tom and told him about the meeting. He was pleased that I had gotten closure and said it sounded like Brenda was genuinely remorseful. "You think she will reoffend?" I asked. "Hard to say," Tom replied. "Prison changes people, sometimes for the better, sometimes for the worse. But she lost everything, and that is a powerful motivator to change. I hope for her sake she uses this time to become a better person." I hoped so too, despite everything. Life continued. Fall arrived with cooler temperatures and beautiful foliage. The HOA held elections for new board members, and I actually considered running but decided against it. I had had enough of HOA politics for a lifetime. Instead, I focused on my own life. I started dating a woman named Francine Cole who worked at the local library. We had met at a community event, and she had heard about my battle with the HOA. She told me she admired how I had stood up for myself. Francine and I hit it off immediately. She was kind, intelligent, and had a wonderfully sarcastic sense of humor. By October, we were spending most of our free time together, and I was happier than I had been in years. One evening, she came over for dinner, and we were sitting on the back deck when she pointed at the propane tank. "So that is the famous tank that started everything," I laughed. "Yep. Just a regular propane tank that became the center of a criminal case." "Do you ever regret moving here after everything that happened?" I thought about that. At first, yes, I regretted it constantly. But now, no, this is my home. I have good neighbors, the HOA is actually functional now, and I met you. So in the end, maybe it all worked out the way it was supposed to. She smiled and kissed me. "I am glad you stayed." As winter approached again, almost a full year after the nightmare had started, I found myself reflecting on everything I had learned. I had learned that standing up for yourself was worth it, even when it was hard and expensive. I had learned that bullies often crumble when someone finally pushes back. I had learned that communities could heal from corruption if good people stepped up. Most importantly, I had learned that home was not just about the physical house or the location. It was about feeling safe, respected, and free to live your life without someone else trying to control you. The propane tank got refilled regularly now, and I had installed a locking valve on it to prevent anyone from ever connecting to it again. The scar on the ground where the illegal pipe had been buried was starting to fade, grass growing over the disturbed earth. One December morning, exactly a year after I had discovered the empty tank, I stood in the same spot looking at it. The gauge showed 3/4 full. The house was warm. Coffee was brewing in the kitchen. Francine was inside making breakfast. George walked by walking his dog and waved. "Morning, Ryan. Cold one today." "Sure is," I called back. He paused. "Hey, I have been meaning to tell you, the board is putting up a plaque at the community center. It is going to commemorate the reforms that were made after the whole Brenda situation. They are calling them the Norwood reforms." I was stunned. "They are naming them after me." "Well, you are the one who exposed everything. Patricia thought it was fitting. There is going to be a small ceremony next month if you want to attend." I did not know what to say. I had never sought recognition for what happened. I had just been trying to protect my property and hold someone accountable. "I will think about it," I said. George grinned. "You should come. You are kind of a legend around here now." After he left, I went back inside where Francine was plating eggs and toast. I told her about the plaque. "That is wonderful," she said. "You should definitely go to the ceremony." "I do not know. It feels weird being celebrated for something that was basically just self-defense. You exposed a criminal and saved the HOA from financial ruin. That is worth celebrating." I supposed she was right. The ceremony was held on a sunny Saturday in January. Most of the neighborhood turned out for it. Patricia gave a speech about the reforms, which included mandatory background checks for board members, financial audits every quarter, and a clear process for homeowners to appeal fines or decisions. When she unveiled the plaque, I felt a strange mixture of emotions. Pride, certainly, but also sadness for how much pain and conflict had been necessary to get to this point. The plaque read, "The Norwood Reforms, established January 2025. These governance guidelines were created to ensure transparency, accountability, and fairness in our community. May we never forget that HOA leadership is a responsibility, not a privilege, and that every homeowner deserves to be treated with dignity and respect." People applauded, and several neighbors came up to thank me personally. Many of them shared their own stories of mistreatment under Brenda's leadership, smaller incidents that had never risen to the level of criminal behavior but had made their lives miserable. I realized then that what had happened was about more than just my propane tank. It was about a systematic abuse of power that had affected dozens of people. By fighting back, I had not just helped myself, but had created change that would protect future residents of Riverside Gardens. As the ceremony ended and people mingled over coffee and cookies, I stood looking at the plaque and felt a sense of peace. The nightmare was truly over. Justice had been served. The community was healing. Francine came up beside me and took my hand. "How are you feeling?" "Good," I said, and I meant it. Really good. That evening, back at home, I sat at my kitchen table and reflected on the entire journey. From that cold January morning when I discovered the empty tank, through the escalating conflict with Brenda, the legal battles, the criminal trial, and finally, to this day of recognition and closure. I thought about writing down the whole story, maybe as a cautionary tale for other homeowners dealing with HOA tyranny. But then I decided against it. I had lived it once. I did not need to relive it again. Instead, I opened my laptop and wrote a simple email to Tom, thanking him for his guidance and support throughout the ordeal. He wrote back almost immediately, congratulating me on the ceremony and saying he was proud of how I had handled everything. I also wrote a letter to the Department of Corrections, to be forwarded to Brenda. In it, I explained that while I was not ready to say I forgave her completely, I held no active hatred toward her anymore. I told her about the reforms and the plaque, and I said I hoped she was using her time in prison to truly change and become someone who would never hurt people the way she had hurt so many. I never received a response, and I did not expect one. Spring came again, bringing new life and new beginnings. Francine and I got engaged in April, and we started making plans for a small wedding in the fall. We decided to stay in my house in Riverside Gardens, which had truly become our home. The propane tank continued to sit on its concrete pad, doing its job quietly and without incident. Sometimes I would walk past it and shake my head, amazed that such a mundane object had been at the center of such chaos. But life had moved on. The past was the past. The future was bright and full of possibilities. One warm evening in May, George and his wife came over for a barbecue. We sat on the deck, eating grilled steaks and drinking wine, talking about everything except HOA drama. At one point, George raised his glass. "A toast to Ryan, who taught us all that sometimes you have to fight for what is right, even when it is hard." Everyone clinked glasses, and I felt grateful for these friends, this community, and this life I had built. Later that night, after everyone had gone home and Francine had fallen asleep beside me, I lay in bed thinking. I thought about how close I had come to just accepting the theft and the harassment. How easy it would have been to pay the fines, to let them keep using my propane, to be the bigger person and walk away. But I had not done that. I had stood my ground. I had fought back. And in doing so, I had not only protected myself but had exposed corruption and created lasting change. I fell asleep that night with a smile on my face, knowing that I had done the right thing and that everything had worked out exactly as it should. The following months were peaceful and happy. Francine and I got married in October in a small ceremony at a vineyard outside Boise. Many of our neighbors attended, including Patricia and the current HOA board members, who had become friends rather than adversaries. As we danced at our reception, I looked around at all the people who had supported us through difficult times, and I felt incredibly lucky. Years later, when people would ask me about the HOA situation, I would tell them the whole story. Some people would be shocked at Brenda's audacity. Others would be angry on my behalf. But everyone always asked the same question at the end: would I do it all again? The answer was always yes. Because standing up for yourself, protecting your rights, and refusing to be bullied were not just about winning or losing. They were about maintaining your dignity and self-respect. They were about drawing a line and saying this far and no further. The propane tank still sits on its concrete pad behind my house. It still provides fuel for my stove and hot water heater. And it still serves as a reminder of that year when everything went crazy, when a simple case of theft spiraled into criminal charges and prison time. But mostly, it reminds me that I am capable of standing up for myself, that justice can prevail, and that even the darkest situations can lead to positive change. Riverside Gardens is a better community now because of what happened. The HOA operates transparently and fairly. Homeowners are treated with respect, and everyone knows that the board serves the residents, not the other way around. As for Brenda, I heard through the grapevine that she was released from prison after serving 2.5 years. She moved out of state to live with her sister and was working at a nonprofit helping other former inmates reintegrate into society. I hope she had truly changed and found peace. My life continued, full and happy. Francine and I talked about starting a family. I got a promotion at work. We took vacations and hosted holiday parties and lived the normal, boring, beautiful life that I had always wanted. And through it all, that propane tank sat there, a silent witness to the chaos it had unwittingly caused and the justice that had ultimately prevailed. Sometimes the smallest things lead to the biggest changes. Sometimes standing up for yourself means risking everything. And sometimes, just sometimes, the good guys actually win. That is my story, the tale of how an HOA used my propane for their pool heater, how I disconnected it and let their pipes burst, and how that single act of defiance exposed corruption and changed an entire community. Looking back now, I would not change a thing.